That was Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, Donald Trump, and J.D. Vance putting aside politics for a moment this week to attend the memorial service on the 23rd anniversary of the 9/11 attacks. Like most Americans, I remember exactly where I was on that September day. After being evacuated from the State Department, I walked to the Potomac River, where I could see smoke pouring from the Pentagon after a hijacked jet tore through the building. But what I did not know until I got a call from the CIA just a few weeks ago was that a young Navy officer who nearly died in the Pentagon that day, one who years earlier was on a Navy ship that launched the first direct attacks on al-Qaeda, eventually joined the small team that would finally find the mastermind of 9/11, Osama bin Laden, the man who killed nearly 3,000 Americans and almost killed Kevin Shaeffer as well. It is a remarkable story that only the CIA has told until now. We met at the Pentagon Memorial on a cloudless day, much like that September day in 2001, when Kevin Shaeffer was inside the Pentagon's Navy Command Center watching the horror in New York unfold.
When we saw the second aircraft hit, very distinctly, I remember hearing some audible gasps throughout our command center space.
So this looks like it is some sort of a concerted effort to attack the World Trade Center that is underway.
That was 9:03 a.m. Shock and disbelief, but no indication the Pentagon would be next. But 34 minutes later, at 9:37 a.m.,
our belief at the moment is that an aircraft has crashed into either the courtyard itself or into that particular side of the building.
American Airlines Flight 77 ripped through the building.
I felt the blast. The initial blast felt like it came from behind me, and it threw me to the ground. I knew I was on fire, badly burned, and everything around me had been blown to bits and was in flames.
Everyone on the plane died instantly. 125 killed inside the Pentagon, 42 of them in the command center with Shaeffer.
I remember being on the ground, putting myself out, extinguishing the flames, putting my hands over my head, kind of feeling them slick. I think what was probably being doused with jet fuel and debris and things, and really no one around me left around me. And so in that moment was when I realized that I had to fight and climb my way out, or else I was going to make it.
Fighting through darkness and dense black smoke, Shaeffer saw a sliver of daylight.
So I felt my adrenaline kick in, and as I rushed across that space to the daylight that was shining through a freshly blown out hole, and I crossed the threshold from the carnage behind me to relative safety in front of me.
And there in the light, Sergeant First Class Steve Workman.
He found himself there just as I was walking through that threshold, and our eyes met and for a brief moment, and I called out to him, screamed out to him as best I could, I need help, get me some help. And he took me and laid me onto a maintenance cart, and we were off seeking aid.
Nearly half of the then 29-year-old's body was seared by deep burns, including his arms and hands.
I knew they wanted to cut off the wedding band I wore on my left hand and my Naval Academy class ring that I wore on my right hand. Both of the rings meant so much to me, and there was no way I was going to let anyone cut them off. And so I yelled, "Stop, stop," and was able to muster up my will and strength and get my wedding band off and my class ring off. And I handed them off to a nurse nearby, and I thought, now you can get on with saving my life. And it was my last conscious memory of 9/11.
When he woke up, his skin and lungs charred from fire and jet fuel, the pain was nearly unbearable.
The pain of the burns was beyond description. I liken them to the color white, and white, hot pain is really the only way to describe them.
Pain and infections, doctors were not sure he would survive.
One morning in October, succumbed to my injuries and flatlined twice. But they brought me back each time, and I bounced back stronger, but they really had to introduce some novel techniques to break down the infection in my lungs and fight them off with what they essentially used live maggots that they had bred in laboratories to be sterile to eat the infections off my arms.
So you had live maggots on your arms?
Indeed.
Eating the infection. It worked?
Indeed, it worked. It saved my arms.
When the danger finally passed and he knew he would live, Shaeffer found a new and powerful purpose.
I thought it was possibly one of the reasons why I had made it through, that I wanted to serve and learn the lessons of 9/11 to help prevent another 9/11, help secure this country.
Chair of the National Commission on Terrorist Attacks upon the United States, I hereby convene this hearing.
He fought to get a role on the 9/11 Commission that investigated how the terrorists managed to carry out their mission. But the mastermind, Osama bin Laden, was still out there. Shaeffer wanted to do more. And you wanted to find him.
No doubt.
It was then, in 2007, that Shaeffer joined the CIA as a targeter, eventually assigned to the small team that was trying to track down bin Laden, the terrorist who almost killed him.
The hunt at the time was active and ongoing. I knew some individuals on the team, but very much so wanted to be a part of it.
It would be years before the team finally zeroed in on a compound in Pakistan and a man the team dubbed the Pacer. The lead targeter, portrayed in the movie Zero Dark 30,
but bin Laden is there, and you're going to kill him for me,
was certain they had their man.
And that individual had a very high confidence that it was bin Laden.
President Obama gave the go-ahead, and on May 1st, 2011, as his team watched in real time in the White House as the Navy SEALs descended into the bin Laden compound, Kevin Shaeffer and his team were watching the same images at a CIA command center in Virginia.
When that first helicopter kind of spun and performed a controlled but hard landing inside the compound, I think everyone's heart stopped.
And the mood in that room was just
tense. You could hear a pin drop.
But the SEALs kept going until they found their target.
We heard the initial call out, Jackpot Geronimo, in the space, and that was met with a bit of jubilation. That lasted for only a matter of seconds because everyone then was really intently focused on the evacuation, getting them out.
And once they were out, what do you remember?
I packed up my things and I kind of walked back to our main counterterrorism space. I remember entering the space and joining up with a senior colleague and friend, went into his office and shared a giant hug, and just started then initially feeling that sense of closure. We reviewed the photos from the scene, realized that they had gotten our man, and that there was no doubt.
You saw a picture of bin Laden.
Indeed.
After he'd been killed.
Indeed.
Shaeffer walked out of the CIA that night before the rest of the world knew what had happened. But he wanted one person in particular to know, the Army sergeant who had helped save his life.
I had to call Sergeant Workman, who I knew was an early to bed and early to rise kind of person. And I gave him a call, probably woke him up and said, hey, turn on the TV, there's some news that's going to be breaking.
That the United States has conducted an operation that killed Osama bin Laden, the leader of al-Qaeda, and a terrorist who's responsible for the murder of thousands of innocent men, women, and children.
You watched President Obama at home with your wife?
I did. She was holding my hand, and we didn't say a word. We just digested the moment and thought over the last 10 years at the time, all that we'd been through, all that we collectively had gone through, and for me, just thinking about the effort, the great effort that many, many, many people put in to get to that moment, and just being thankful to be a part of it.
Just an amazing story. Kevin Shaeffer has since gone on to do advocacy work for 9/11 victims and their families. He remains healthy, though the scars from that day will stay with him forever. This is the first time Shaeffer has talked publicly about his years in the CIA to anyone outside the agency, but you can learn much more about his remarkable story on the CIA's podcast, The Langley Files, a 3-part series I highly recommend.